and we're live, George.
Cool. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. We're doing something a bit different this time, just because we've got an amazing special guest. So, also welcome to the Arsenal Women Chat Show. Let me introduce you to my guests first. Laura, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. It's been a bit of a stressful morning, but we'll get through it, and then I can be on the road to London and therefore the game tomorrow, and I'll be in my happy place.
Nice one. Yeah, so it should be good. I feel like this week's really, really dragged. I don't know why. So just want to get back because it'll be my first game at the Emirates tomorrow because I miss Lionesses. So looking forward to it. Also, so I'm going to introduce you to our special guest. We've got Tom Garry, who's the women's football writer for the Guardian, and just an absolute diamond bloke. How you doing, Tom?
Oh, well, thank you for the kind words. I'm very well, thank you. It's really nice to see you guys, and thank you for inviting me. Really lovely to have a chance to chat to you.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good catching up with you and chatting. Obviously, we've been working on some stuff, haven't we? Like with audio description around the WSL ground. So we'll touch a bit on that in a little while. Yeah. So just starting with you, Tom. Obviously, where did it all start? When you got into the journalism and for the women's football, was that ultimately where you wanted to start?
Oh goodness, yeah, going back a long time now. I've been very lucky to work in as a sports journalist for about 11 or 12 years. Having started doing it for fun at university and student radio and student television, where I met my wife a long time ago, and I was working for the BBC in 2015, doing a bit of freelance work for them when an opportunity came up to get involved with their women's football coverage. Which I absolutely jumped at the chance to do that. I don't think it was a premeditated plan that I thought, I'll become a women's football reporter. But once you kind of get started with it and you get the bug, it's sort of, I've never stopped really. So that's been 10 years now of covering the WSL and finding it such a fascinating patch to cover. And the game's obviously grown enormously since then, but you meet so many interesting people, you meet so many helpful and kind people, and I think it's a sport where we're lucky that reporting, I think, can still make a bit of a difference, hopefully, because there are still so many things that we want to see changed and improved, and a lot of work for the women's game to do to get better. So it feels really rewarding as well. So I've been very, very lucky. Nowadays I'm writing for the Guardian, which is a real privilege. They love women's football. So I've been getting behind it. So, yeah, here we are now, 2025, 10 years later.
Yeah, and obviously you said like how long you've been doing like the journalism in women's football. I know it's probably a bit of a open question, but what do you think the big drastic change has been from when you first started to now? Do you think it's down to just the games being on the TV more, or do you think it's a lot to do with the Lionesses' success in the European Championships? Where would you say it? What would you say is the big difference?
Well, the Lionesses has definitely helped in terms of the support and the awareness for the sport. They deserve big credit, but I do think that a group or a sector that doesn't really get enough credit for helping grow the women's game is some of the top clubs. But belatedly, I think a lot of them were late with the exception of Arsenal. I think almost everybody was late to getting behind this sport.
Yeah.
But in the last few years, I do think a lot of credit needs to go to not just Arsenal as well, but Chelsea and the Manchester clubs, and also clubs such as before their recent problems, Reading, who really helped push things on, Birmingham, teams that helped the WSL really kick forward. Without without the investment from the clubs, especially Chelsea and Arsenal, without their investment, I don't think we would have seen the rapid professionalization that we have seen. And because they've gone for it, they've kind of almost forced others to follow suit as well. So credit to them. Like they deserve a bit of credit. And there's been a lot of like key moments, hasn't there? Whether it was the Olympic Games in 2012 that kind of prompted a big surge in interest, or how well the Lionesses did in Canada in 2015. But for me, the single biggest moment that's changed everything for the sport is when Sky Sports got involved with the broadcast rights. That Sky coverage has just taken it to a completely another level. And the finances that brings into the league as well has helped, but more the exposure and the difference, because the big difference from 10 years ago that you notice as a reporter is that 10 years ago there was not much coverage, and then there was a step change once Sky got involved with the rights, that suddenly they were covering it on Sky Sports News as well. So you would turn on Sky Sports News and there'd be a ticker along the bottom saying that I don't know, Sam Kerr signed a new contract, or Leah Williamson's out with an injury, or interviews with players, and all the coverage, all the kind of awareness for the league that's come with that, and that they've really upped their game since, and that's been huge. So enormous credit to the broadcasters for what they've done, because without them, you don't have the product that you have now. I think that really needs to be said.
Cool.
Tom, do you think with the rapid growth of the game that it's become easier for you to write on pieces of the sport now than what it was 10 years ago?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, yes and no, and I'm not trying to dodge the question. I do think the literal answer is both yes and no. I'll try and explain what I mean. Yeah, yes, in terms of it's much easier to be able to watch more of the action and or read more about the other games. So because most teams play on a Sunday at the same time, we can only attend one game at once. So going back, let's say 10 years ago, you would see the game that you saw on a Sunday, and then the other games you might be relying on the goals clips on highlight shows, or like a little bit of YouTube footage, like to see what happened in those games. But now it's much easier to get a informed opinion on what happened in other matches that you weren't at, because there's so many more post-match interview clips with the managers to hear what they had to say. You can watch much more extended highlights. You can watch back 4 games in some cases, and that extra cover and the coverage from all the other media outlets and the newspapers and Sky and BBC is so extensive that there's a lot more information out there. So there's stats providers like Opta doing a great job, Stats Perform, and so many others. That makes it, to answer your question, that makes it much easier. What it's probably got a bit harder now, but it's a good thing for the women's game. But it's because it's a lot more professionalized now. I would say that some of the interviews and access to players in some cases is a bit harder now. Like I've spoken to colleagues who in the pre-WSL days, who predated my time in the sport, if you wanted to just interview an England player in, say, 2009, you probably ended up just getting their phone number and giving them a call and having a chat over the phone over a cup of tea, and you've done your interview. These days, that's much more difficult because it's so much more professionalized, and understandably, the players need a bit of privacy for understandable reasons. So you can't just call up an Arsenal striker anymore for a quick chat for an interview that will go in the paper the next day. Like, that doesn't happen. So that side of it is probably more difficult, but in a good way. Like, it's welcome professionalization for the clubs that report, and it's getting harder to report things more exclusively now that there are so many other rivals. 7-8 years ago, when there weren't so many of us trying to write up stories, it was relatively easier to get a transfer scoop, whereas nowadays you might find that, I don't know, David Ornstein's going to post about it first. So that's got harder as well, if that makes sense. But again, in a welcome way, because I think the more coverage, the better for everybody, really. So it's welcome changes.
Yeah. Also, like Tom, so we see, obviously we do have a bias on here. I'm not going to lie. Like, obviously we are an Arsenal supporters, but obviously you see Arsenal doing what they're doing with sellouts at grounds like home, away. How many we took for the Champions League final? Do you think maybe, and it's not an actual professional, it's just a personal question. Do you think the future is that most of the WSL teams will probably move to, say, bigger men's stadiums than, say, like the ones where you're seeing like Meadow Parkins Meadow, because of how much the following's drastically increased?
Oh, well, firstly, it's really important to say how much Arsenal have led the way. They're an outlier in this because they've
Yeah.
done such an incredible job off the pitch. To answer your question more literally, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that everybody will go down that model. Sometimes for operational or logistical reasons. It's not like I really, really admire what Arsenal have done, and I would love it if every single WSL club also did the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's not always that simple. There are complications with sharing the main grounds in terms of fixture clashes, in terms of the women's games fixtures sometimes then having to move to accommodate men's changes in the men's schedule. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. I wish that wasn't the case. I would love it one day I would love the day when men's league fixtures start having to move around in the diary so that it can, because there's a really important women's game that was already penciled in for that weekend. But trying to think how to best way to go. More broadly, yes. So more generally, I would think that more clubs will go in that direction, and quite a lot already have. Villa are at Villa Park, Everton are at Goodison now,
And
and
so
planning
what I kind of mean is, like, I think there's games that you'd like to see, say, like your Manchester United or your Man City or even Chelsea play a lot more at those stadiums. Do you think that could be something like, because obviously we see Manchester United play at Leeds Sports Village, but sometimes Old Trafford could be available.
Yeah, Lee's a fascinating case study because I think the size of Lee, which is significantly bigger than Kingsmeadow and Boreham Wood, like the size of Lee is sort of pretty perfect right now. But I think Manchester United women will outgrow it fairly soon, particularly for bigger matches. And the stadium itself is a great size. The infrastructure around Lee is not really up to it. When that place sells out, the traffic pre and post game.
Yeah,
That
I know
supermarket
that
nearby, and where it is geographically, it's really not set up. So if you ever did get to a stage where they were averaging 15,000 a week, for example, which you obviously can't fit that in Lee, but if they had, Lee's not ready to accommodate that. So they're a really interesting case study, and my gut feeling is that they will certainly long term move away from Lee.
I also find Chelsea a really interesting concept as well. So obviously Arsenal and Chelsea are massive rivals. We're not going to downplay that, but I just find it that sometimes Chelsea have games at the Bridge and the attendance is a lot lower than I thought it would be. And what I'm saying, why I think that's interesting, because they are the champions for the last few years. What Arsenal do when we have, like, I think we had like 20 or 30,000 on a Friday night against Brighton at the Emirates last season or season before. I just find it, I don't know. Is it more what the supporters clubs of those clubs do? I don't know what you think, like just as a football fan.
Well, it's important, I think there's sometimes a lot of negativity around, let's say, a 10,000 attendance in a big stadium like Stamford Bridge, but actually I look at it differently. Like, I think that's still a significantly. I'd much rather they played in front of 10,000 at Stamford Bridge than played in front of like 3,000 at Kingsmeadow. That would be because I think the facilities are so much better for the players. Like these athletes deserve better changing room, better. So that giving them the better facilities, I think that outweighs that for me. So I'd always much rather they played at the Bridge, and I'd always similarly. I wish for West Ham they could play at the London Stadium more often, for example.
Yeah, so do I.
Players deserve that, Players really deserve that. I don't have too much of a problem. What most of the clubs could really do to help with the atmosphere is in those circumstances is which they are kind of starting to do, but is to prioritise the seating in the lower tier around altogether. So getting fans kind of in clusters where the atmosphere builds a little bit more. You know, when the fans are spread out a bit and there's lots of empty seats behind the goals, or you don't quite get the same feel. You want the fans to be really close to the pitch. So they are doing this largely, but I would want them to sell the seats that are closer to the pitch first before they start selling ones higher up. And in terms of the product on television and how it looks on TV, they need to follow what Everton have done at Goodison Park in just selling the 3 stands that are seen by the television cameras. There are too many clubs in the league right now who are making the mistake of selling the tickets on the same side as the television camera. So the product looks rubbish on a television because the camera is pointing at 3 empty stands. And it just looks so much better as a product when you can see fans celebrating behind it, you can see fans cheering. Like a good example of that, I think, is Spurs at the moment, where they're getting some decent numbers at Leyton Orient, but they're all behind the camera, so you can't see any of them on the television. And there weren't actually that many more people at Goodison Park for a game I was at last week than Everton, but all of them were in front of the camera and looked so much better. Just looked so much better. So sorry, I've gone off at a slight tangent there, George.
No, I appreciate it. No, I appreciate it. It's just, and I think also what some people who don't have the luxury to go into the games is sometimes it depends where the microphone or them sort of things are in the ground, doesn't it? So someone on the TV might be watching it saying, "Oh, it's quite quiet," but then when you're actually at the game, you're like, "Well, no, they were singing, or the atmosphere was quite loud."
I find that sometimes at the Emirates, especially when obviously it's on TV, that you're in that crowd, especially in Block 10, where you know most of Arsenal's atmosphere is for the women's game, that you find you go into, say, like our supporters group chat, and they're like, "Oh, you were awful quiet today," and you're like,
I've got no voice.
And where I was sitting, it was pretty loud.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to find that balance, isn't it?
It's a really
what
good
we
point.
can do to improve that.
The Emirates actually is maybe unique. Even when listening to men's football games at the Emirates, on the radio, it sounds quite quiet. I think it's to do with where the commentary positions are underneath the low roof or above that lower tier, where perhaps the background noise isn't quite picked up on the microphones. Whereas when you're actually there in the stadium, the atmosphere sounds fantastic. But on the radio, say if you're listening on one of the national broadcasters, the fans sound louder at, I don't know, Portman Road, for example, last season for a men's game than they do at the Emirates, where there's like 3 times more people. So that's probably just more of a sound thing than an atmosphere thing, because I think the atmosphere has been brilliant, and the women's games at the Emirates have really taken things to another level. I think well done to the supporters clubs for mobilising everybody. Well done to the club for building that emotionally invested fan base who want to be there, and the marketing teams have done a great job. But it kind of also comes down to, where are we now? Like nearly 40 years of work of people working hard to build up this club and the brand and the history. Because a club like West Ham, for example, has got such a more difficult position to build on that, because they haven't got the same history that Arsenal have, and the same storylines and the same affection for the club in the women's side, just because they haven't had the history.
In terms of Arsenal, Tom, what do you think Arsenal are doing different to pull the crowd in compared to like Chelsea or like say that West Ham, or what do you think they're doing differently from the other clubs that we're getting such high attendance records every game going forward?
Well, they've put a lot of time and effort into the research of who actually comes to the games. I think not all clubs, but some other clubs have made the mistake of just trying to reach out to their men's teams' fan bases and thinking that they're the ones they can persuade to come through the door to the women's games. And that tactic isn't as clever as what Arsenal have done. Arsenal worked out that a lot of people coming to the Emirates for the women's games had never been to the Emirates before. And they saw this huge potential in reaching out to other people who don't come to the men's games. And I'd love other clubs to follow that trend, because So there are some people who would want to go and watch both men's and women's games, and massive respect to them. But not everyone has the time to do 2 games a weekend, and not everyone has the money to do 2 games a weekend. But Arsenal knew and realised and did the work to attract these people. There is a large group of people who would love to come along who hadn't been going to watch men's football, and that's a really big demographic that they've worked hard to attract and help them fall in love with this team, and they've done a really good job in that sense. I think it's lazy for me to simply say it all comes down to just marketing effort, because you have to do it intelligently as well. And I don't want to imply that the other clubs like Everton or Liverpool or Villa, for example, are not trying as hard, but at the end of the day, if you as a club decide to dedicate more and more research to more and more resources, to marketing and all of that fan engagement research and getting to know your potential fan base, then you increase your odds of succeeding. And I think that a lot of the clubs in the WSL could do with just taking a few leaves out of Arsenal's book and upping their game on the marketing level, and just not so much. It's not just about advertising. It's more about like just taking the time to go out there and really work out who and when fans do come, keeping their information, keeping in touch with them, getting feedback from them, and why did you maybe not come back to the last game? What could we do differently to improve the match day experience? And talking to the supporters about what they want, and going out into the community and talking to someone who didn't choose to go to a game and finding out what might make it more attractive to them. Because Arsenal has shown it doesn't have to be a game. It doesn't have to be like fireworks or a gig or like cheerleaders, or it doesn't have to be those little gimmicks. You don't have to. They've done it just through football, but they've made the match day experience appealing, very cleverly, and well done to them. So and also, sorry, it's a long answer, but it helps having a really good team, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really helps having the Lionesses are really marketable. International stars like Cardente, really marketable. We could sort of be here criticizing West Ham, Spurs, Everton, Liverpool, Villa, etc. But then it's not as easy to sell their squad to fans as it is to sell Rousseau, Kelly, Williamson, etc. That's just a natural reality of the fact that they've got a really sellable product right now, Arsenal.
Yeah. Talking about teams and players, I want to kind of get your view on the London Lioness sort of question. So obviously, I think in the women's fan base, there's some people are not particularly keen on the multi-club format, but then I think there's some people like, oh yeah, but it makes the WSL a bit more competitive with the money they've spent. Tom, where do you kind of sit with that? Me personally, I think to make leagues more competitive, and this is just my opinion on it, you have to have teams that spend money that are not the top 4 clubs, because otherwise I don't think the competitiveness is there. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really it's easy for me to say this when it's not my money that I'm asking people to spend, but I really want to see more clubs investing more money and spending more money, because there's a lot of clubs who have been in the WSL who see the women's team as something that needs to break even, or they don't want to lose too much money with it. Almost like it's like a financial inconvenience, and it's so refreshing to see investors coming into the sport, wanting to invest in money and seeing a future where they can see returns on their investment because they believe in the product and believe in women. So respect to Michelle Kang for that, respect to Mercury 13 for that, coming into Bristol City, and there's lots of other investors at the moment looking at clubs, talking to clubs, seeing this. Because okay, so what you're asking, what my view on London City spending? I understand why there are clubs sort of concerned about maybe the rules being a little bit too lax in terms of like profit and sustainability. And I think there are a lot of clubs who run the City and think, oh, you know, there needs to be tighter spending rules because we can't compete. But I suppose my view would be you could compete. You can.
Yeah.
We're not talking about like 50 million quid on signings, you know, with the sort of money that some of these Premier League clubs would spend on a men's player every transfer window. So you could compete with them if you wanted to. Interestingly, the league's approach on this is very different to the men's football, where obviously there are very strict rules now, aren't there, on profitability and sustainability. The women's league's approach to it seems to be much more along the lines of wanting to encourage investment, and they don't want to deter investors from spending money. So that's a really interesting position right now. It's going to be a good debate in the next few years whether the league keeps the rules relatively loose, so that someone like Michelle can sign lots of players from over £1 million and build up to competitive, or whether they bring in a stronger caps on spending. But I get the impression they don't want to deter investors in any way. So at the moment, the rules favour someone like Michelle Kang in doing that, and that's very different to the men's football picture, where if a multi-billionaire went in and took over, say, Leeds United right now, they couldn't go and sign the players that Liverpool men have signed because of the financial rules. So really interesting differences in the men's and the women's game right now. Have I answered the question, or have I just waffled there?
No, you have. I just think it's really interesting because I look at most of the WSL, apart from say Lionesses and perhaps Leicester, but even Leicester, like the men's team, have spent like a good 30-40 million in the Championship.
Yeah.
So comparing what Lionesses spent, it's like short change in the men's game. So I just wonder, are they gonna probably put this PRS rule into the women's game before anything like that? But I think if you've got teams like Arsenal, and that's being an Arsenal fan, Arsenal, City or Chelsea complaining, I would just say, well, I'm sorry, but you have got a lot more money that you could put in. And I think Arsenal have started to do that, and perhaps Chelsea. But yeah, I just think it makes the league a bit more competitive, Tom, to be fair. Like, it reminds me of when Chelsea first started spending money in the men's game.
Yeah, there's going to be a balance. Like,
Yeah,
there needs to be some rules, because it should remain. It needs to remain like there needs to remain a level of integrity to the competition, and it's really important that as a sport that we don't want a situation where in the future, hypothetically, somebody could simply buy the 11 best players in the world
yeah,
with no cost controls at all and just win everything and make an enormous loss financially, because that actually would be counterintuitive to what the women's game is trying to show, that it could be financially viable. So that would actually make it more difficult, because for the transfer fees and the wages for the players and the agents' fees needs to rise kind of carefully in line with the increases in income. And you need to, it's like chicken and egg, but you don't want to get to a point where what we don't want to happen. We don't want to see crowds continue to increase and say like broadcast money continue to increase and sponsorship money to start to increase, but the costs increase at a higher rate because of inflation in it and all the transfer fees and the wages. So that there is a scenario in a few years' time where we could have all the clubs in the WSL may well have doubled their income streams, or maybe even trebled their income streams, but that their expenditure might have gone up by fourfold. So they're actually losing more money. That's a scenario that I think all the clubs will need to be quite mindful of.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I think I do land on the side of encouraging the investment, because it's so much more important that this league is competitive rather than just the same teams winning it all the time.
Yeah.
Where are we now? We're 6 years in a row. Chelsea won the title. That's starting to become a little bit unhealthy. Generally, like, when does that become a problem for the 10 times in a row? 15 times in a row, 20 times. I don't think they will do that because it is really close between Chelsea, Arsenal, and the Manchester clubs. But look at Formula One. Whenever they get to try and make it more competitive,
It just reminds me of the Bundesliga, mate. To be fair, it's like Bayern Munich were winning it year after year after year after year, and then they put the league was like, oh, this can't carry on, and then you've got teams like Borussia Dortmund and Bayer Leverkusen who actually were given more of an opportunity. I'm not saying the league wanted them to win, but ultimately they probably did.
Well, look at Scottish men's football. Like, it's enduring a demise because and it's largely because the same club, Celtic, keep winning everything all the time. And we don't want to see that. And I don't think we will see that in the women's game. But we don't want to see that. Look, women's football has a chance to do things differently. It's broken away now. The WSL is run independently. They could do things completely differently. Look, so for example, like I don't think they're going to do this, but they could go into a situation where they gave the most prize money in the league to the teams that finished like lower down. I don't think this is why I'm not running a league, because I haven't got a clue what I'm talking about. But they could be radical. They could say, a team that comes like 12th is going to get the more money than what we give to the winners of the league, to try and like spread the cost. That's people listening to that are laughing. But we could do the same in the they could be different in the Women's FA Cup. You could front load the prize funds given to teams that win from the lower leagues, teams that win a first round or second qualifying round or the third round ties from the lower leagues. They could get a larger chunk of the prize money, and then you could give a smaller chunk of the prize money to the team that wins the Women's FA Cup. So that the wealth is like redistributed. The women's game could do that like a little bit differently.
I do think they like with I've said this for a long time, and I know this goes back to UEFA as well. I do think to make obviously the WSL more competitive than it is now, they could say that the winners of the FA Cup get a spot in this Europa League sort of competition, because then I think I think they could do something like that. Because if you look at the Subway Cup, the top teams go through, like Arsenal and Chelsea, they only have to play a couple of games and they're in the final. So I don't particularly think that's as fair. But with the FA Cup, say, for example, you had Manchester United versus Tottenham the other year in the FA Cup. And at that time, if one of them, but if whoever's in that final, that could force other teams to want to think, oh, do you know what, we've got a chance of a shot at Europe here, that think, oh, we're not really going to get anywhere near the top 3 or 4.
Just super interesting conversation. The new Women's Europa Cup, the people who organised that, admirably, I think they really tried to focus the access list on developing leagues and on some of the lower ranked national associations leagues around Europe, so that they wanted a competition that wasn't simply dominated by the English, French and Spanish and German clubs, so that there was opportunities to have good runs in Europe for teams from Eastern, Baltic countries, I don't know, Serbia, Bosnia, and Scandinavia. They wanted to sort of give them a chance to develop as European clubs, and so I think that was an issue, because what they could have done, like they could have given the 4th or 5th place WSL side an access place. They could have given more, but they didn't, and that was quite deliberate. And I think that's a very different approach to the men's game. They don't want to see 8 English clubs in the women's European competitions like we in the men's. What is it, 6 men's teams in the men's Champions League from England? They don't want that. Their attempt with women's football is to try and make it grow more around Europe. I sort of respect that decision, but at the same time, that's going to be frustrating for a club like Brighton, for example, women's team in England, who, if the rules were similar to the men's, they would be in Europe right now. Dario Vodosic's team.
And I think that would make them grow so much. Like they've got a very young squad. They've got some really good players. Like, so then that's what I mean. All I would say is that if you're doing that, you have one team like that. Not like you can't. That's the maximum you can only have. Say like the 5th place team of the league, which if you look at the other leagues, it's not going to be like the top teams. And I don't think teams like Brighton or whoever finished 5th in the French league or the Spanish league would absolutely go and dominate that competition. I think they would be tested against these other teams.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it could have been Manchester United. If Manchester United hadn't come through their qualifying round, they would have dropped into the Europa Cup.
Which I don't think. Just me. I'm going on a bit of a tandem now, but which I don't think's as fair. Like, why should they get knocked out of one competition to go into another one when someone like Brighton, who had a very good season last season, or when Liverpool finished 5th, or like I think they probably deserved that opportunity more. And that's not because it's Man United. I'd say the same thing about Arsenal. Like I say it about the men's game. I don't like that you get knocked out of one Champions League round and then drop into something else.
No, well said. And there's always been something slightly odd, hasn't there, about going out in the qualifying rounds or the early rounds of a competition and then ending up winning another one as a sort of reward for that. It's a strange one. But I think that's why this is also why the WSL had such deep conversations about their format, like last spring. And I think they will continue to discuss their format, in the coming years. But they seem open to being quite radical in the WSL about how they don't necessarily think they have to run the league in the same format as we run the men's leagues. They think women's football could do something a little bit different. Can I just go on a slight rant here? I would love it if somebody different won the League Cup or the FA Cup.
Yeah.
Just as a reporter, I mean, so Manchester United won the FA Cup 2 seasons ago. That aside, in my 10 years covering this sport, only 3 teams have won all the major trophies in England: Arsenal, Chelsea, and Man City. So basically spent 98% of the time writing about the same 3 teams winning everything, and the majority of those have been Chelsea. Respect to them, well played to them. They've been brilliant. And at some point, I would love it if somebody knew. I would love it so much if Brighton won the League Cup, or Tottenham came and won a trophy, or Villa, or West Ham, or anybody. If anybody, or Liverpool, Everton, if somebody fancied a really good cup run, I would love to cover that, because eventually people, or I think our audience will get a bit bored of reading the same articles, like the same thing over and over again. That's a slight rant there, but that I would be.
You was doing all right until you said Tottenham winning a trophy. I was like,
I forgot where I was then, didn't I, George?
Not having none of that.
For me, last season, the most exciting league in terms of women's football, for me, obviously, as you can tell, I'm Scottish, so the most important
wasn't that great?
was the Scottish League for me last season in the women's football, because there was 4 teams going for that top spot at one point. Just before Christmas, it was Rangers at the top, Celtic second, Hibernian third, Glasgow City fourth. And going on, obviously, the Europa League for the women's, there's only 2 teams in that full Europe, that full European, and it was Hibernian and Glasgow City that was in Champions League, but then Glasgow City had obviously dropped down into the Europa League. But in terms of that was a very close league last season for the Scottish football, women's football. So looking at that, I'm like, where's Rangers in that whole European thing? They should have been up there, but they weren't. Of course, it comes down to coefficient points and whatever else, but it's just horrendous to think that Scottish football once again was just dropped and nothing has risen from it. And it was good to see another team obviously win the league compared to Glasgow City maybe winning it, or Celtic winning it, or Rangers winning it. It was just so nice and refreshing. Going on what you say, it's nice to just see another team win that out of the bigger teams.
Really nice to see. But one of the other things that could change, that could help a league like Scotland's, is UEFA's UEFA could, open up more spaces in these competitions, for like compared to the number of men's clubs that get the chance to compete in Europe, it's significantly smaller in the women's game. And that's the part of that is on UEFA. Like UEFA could, they could make a political decision to give far more space and access to European competitions to more and more clubs, and they could redirect some of the money, the vast amount of money to the men's Champions League, the kind of sickening amount of money involved in the men's Champions League. They could redirect that into the women's game to try and help it grow and develop, and try and address years and years and years of disparity. For the time being, they're still trying to sort of run it in its own commercial independence, and sort of, I don't know. They definitely upped their game. UEFA, like in recent years, respect to them, but there's so much more they could do, and it's still, yeah, that's probably a bigger conversation. But there could have been spaces for all of those 4 teams in Europe if there were more spots available for, if the competitions, if the new Women's Europa Cup, for example, had more spaces. It's still relatively small as a competition compared to the size of the Men's Europa League, Men's Conference League, etc., etc. There's still work for them to do, I think, in the future.
Yeah,
cool. I just want to say to Mark, thank you for watching. So Tom, just so you know, Mark lives in Australia, so he's one of our regulars. So he said, do you think the WSL could ever include Scottish or Welsh women teams in that, or do you think that's not what we should be looking at?
No, personally, no. I'm
glad you said that.
Yeah, personally, no. I think it would be so. I think it's really important for Scotland to grow their own league and try and thrive and try and get that thriving. I also think about the fans just geographically. We have to think about the realistic logistics of Brighton playing away to Hibs, for example. Like we have to think of the supporters, and I don't think that's sensible at all. Personally, I think if there were ever being more radical, could I see a sort of a standalone like cup competition, maybe, where you'd fit that in the calendar? I don't know, where it's already too congested in the calendar. They don't have to do what the men have done and try and do exactly the same formats.
Yeah,
but with Scottish and English teams in the same domestic league, I'd be against that. I just think of the environment as well. I've just so many different ways why I don't think that's a good idea. And I think the priority should be to build up a really strong Scottish Premier League, and not.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, so just for example, like look at sorry to use another men's football example, but look at the men's. The strength of the men's Welsh top flight compared to the strength of the Scottish men's top flight, and imagine how much, if we wind back, say, like, I don't know the history well enough, but if we wind back, say, like many decades, and Cardiff, Swansea, and Wrexham and Newport men had all stayed in the Welsh pyramid. Goodness, I'm probably people listening to this thinking he doesn't know what he's talking about, but.
No, I think that's a good point.
Did they miss an opportunity to be huge clubs like Celtic and Rangers? Did they miss the opportunity to build that kind of, make the Welsh top league? I would hate for the women's game to have that happen in Scottish women's football, and and I'd hate for it to just be like a very small number of Scottish women's pro teams joining the English league, and then the rest of the Scottish women's game just being left behind. I'd hate that to happen. I hope that doesn't happen. That would be my view.
That's a good point. We're just going to move on from that because we could talk about this for hours and hours.
I'm bad at going off on tangents, George.
And I could say a lot about UEFA, especially with the Ballon d'Or in recent times, but we'll leave that for another show. So obviously we had some sad news recently about Matt Beard, absolute trailblazer of the women's game. I think we all know it's really so important to be able to talk to people, and always someone's there, like we say, messages or phone call, like we're always here. What would you like to say about Matt Beard, Tom? Obviously, I think I said it on the show last week. Sometimes words can't describe of how much of an amazing man he was, like generally.
Yeah. Georgie was he was a really good man. He had a lot of time for people, a huge amount of time for other people. He was very, very thoughtful in that he would always ask people how they were, how their loved ones were. He was always really excited to hear about their families and their lives and their updates. And he was a good man in so many ways there. It's the media, from our own experience, he was incredibly generous with his time to the media. He was always very respectful of our profession. He was usually very honest in his interviews and his press conferences. He was quite straight talking. He didn't really beat around the bush. He kind of said it how it was. I think he would be very, very sorely missed. I know a lot of the media packer have been extremely upset. Our love goes out to his family, who, of course, the kind of sadness that we're feeling pales into comparison compared to what they're going through. It's been a really tough week. What's been so heartening is to see all the lovely tributes, but also the generosity of everyone gathering together, rallying around for his family, and the fundraiser that Jackie Oatley organised. I think it's at £50,000 now, which is
that's excellent.
Very heartwarming, isn't it, to see everybody come around and support the family?
Yeah, I think with Matt
been a really
Beard,
tough week.
I think with Matt Beard, what I think speaks volumes for me is that you can hear loads of different people from different circles as well, all saying positive stuff. And even when he was alive, you never heard anything bad about him, or like someone moaning saying, "Oh yeah, well, I don't like him," or I don't know. Do you get what I mean? So I think that's you're hearing people from the men's game saying how an amazing man he was. You've had people from Celtic doing shout outs, obviously everywhere, and you just see the love that he had, and I think that is detriment to me to show how much of a trailblazer in the women's game, but something that's completely separate to that. Just how an amazing human being he was, and so that's kind of where I'm at with it. And like you say, the generosity everyone's shown, I think, speaks volumes.
I think what also speaks for. Oh, sorry, Laura, go ahead.
No. I was just agreeing with what Claude was saying there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you only have to look at how many players who played under him were really keen to move to join his next club. A lot of players followed his managerial career because they really like playing under him so much. And everyone that he's worked with, he's influenced so many careers. I also think it's really important to shout out to the kind of hard work that he's done to build up clubs. Think about Chelsea. Before Emma Hayes, he was their manager, took them to their first cup final on really low salary. While working in another job. He was an estate agent. It's hard to imagine that now, but he took Chelsea to the cup final and took West Ham to their first cup final. Was very, very passionate about the women's game. Even before the Women's Super League, he had success at Millwall. He'd been coaching on the backroom staff at Charlton when they were having success as well with Keith Oanas. He's been very dedicated to the women's game for a very, very long time, and probably didn't get the credit he deserved for helping to grow the sport in so many ways. I'd be very, very sorely missed indeed. I was at Liverpool's game on Wednesday night, and it was a really somber occasion. The queue winding a long way outside the door for people to sign the book of condolence was very moving. You could hear a pin drop inside that room where the book was with the flowers, and it's been a very. I must say, I think so many people in the women's game have conducted themselves with immense class in the last few days, and in difficult circumstances, and yeah, I just want to send out love to everybody who's mourning and in grief at the moment.
I watched an interview. It was Rachel Littlejohn's sister, Shabana Hearn, basically talk about how when Rachel, I think at this point she must have come out of Scottish football and didn't have a club, and she was in contact with Matt, and it was basically Matt was like, listen, come and play football for me, we'll build you up, we'll basically get you back into shape, we'll get you to a club where you want to be. And of course that's where Rachel Littlejohn ended up at West Ham with him. And the upset in Shaban's face was just, it was telling a story, because you could just tell obviously how much of a good guy Matt was. Even just listening, as you said, Tom, listening to other players and how they talk about him, and it's such a sad loss to the women's game. And I just think this week across the full board of the women's game, it's been a tough week for us all, and as fans it's hurt us, as players it's hurt them. It's condolences out to Matt's family, and I just hope there's a lot more done in mental health going forward. And as George touched on as well, don't ever feel alone, and I think that's a strong message to put out there.
Yes, it served as a reminder for all of us, isn't it, to check in on our friends, to check in on our loved ones, and talk to your mates. I feel that as well. You know, I spoke to Matt relatively regularly, but we would always just talk about football. So that's something I've reflected on a lot in the last few days of, how often did I really ask him how he was doing? You know, we would just chat about the football, which I don't know. It's very I think you're right. It's mental health so important, and I just to all of us really, isn't it? It's a reminder to check in on the people that we love and be there for them, I think. And just, if you are ever struggling, please talk to somebody. Please do.
Yeah.
Cool. What we'll do, we'll preview the Arsenal game tomorrow. I forgot who we had for a minute then. Villa. So yeah, we'll look into that, and then what we'll do, we'll finish up, Tom, talking about the article what me and you have been working on. I think that's a nice print to end on, and then just want to say thank you to those who have been able to watch. Just remember to hit that subscribe button. Really, really helps the channel, and helps build it up. And we just talk about football because we enjoy it. We probably talk a lot of rubbish half the time, so to be fair. But yeah, obviously going into the game tomorrow, Tom, Arsenal back at the Emirates against Villa. What's your thoughts going into that? I think Arsenal will probably be feeling confident. I know we had a 0-0 draw against United at Leigh Sports Village, but they always seem to struggle, don't they, there? So what's your thoughts going into Saturday's game?
Well, Arsenal need to play a lot better than they did in the last time they met Aston Villa, of course, towards the end of last season.
Don't remind me.
No, and they'll need to play better than they did away at Manchester United. But I think my gut feeling is Arsenal will win. It will just be quite a tricky test because Villa are a decent team now. They've been very good over the last sort of 6-7 months or so. They've got a lot of pace in counter attack. They've got a lot of quality going forward, and that they are a different animal to what they were this time last year. But I would expect Arsenal to win, and I would say it's the kind of game they have to win at home. If you're going to win, if you're going to beat Chelsea to the title, these are games you have to win. You can't afford to not win, because Chelsea will get 3 points from these kind of fixtures.
Yeah, of course.
And they always do. Even when they're not really playing at their best, they always win. So it's a must win, and I think my gut feeling is Arsenal probably will win it, but it won't be an easy game, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Kind of, like we spoke quite a bit, and there's on the show about Stina Blastinius. obviously we saw last week she started and Russo went into that 10 role. I'll be honest, Tom, I'm not a fan of that. I just
agree
think,
with you there, George.
yeah,
I'm
like
that myself.
I would rather be seeing Leslie Russo through the middle at 9, and then you bring Stina on. As we've seen, she scored some really, really important goals. But also we're also seeing Mariona sitting a bit deeper. Do you think that's kind of holding her back from her attacking play, or do you think it's not noticeable as much of what she does off the ball?
That's a really good point about Mariona and the impact of that tweak. I think I'm right in saying that last season she not only had the highest number of successful sort of passes into the final third and key passes in the final third, but I think Mariona also won the ball back more than anybody else in the WSL in the final third as well, in attacking third. So she was off the ball also really effective, higher up the pitch. I wasn't a massive fan of the Russo-Blacksenius combination being together. I personally think that it works really well when one of them leads the line and the other comes on. I think Russo should start as a central number 9, and Blacksenius should come on, with 20-25 minutes to go with those fresh legs and get running behind and cause a different threat. But it's a really interesting debate, isn't it? My gut feeling is that it won't happen very often. I think it might have just been a sort of tactical reason why that happened against Manchester United, but it wasn't that effective. I generally didn't think Arsenal were that inspiring going forward.
No.
What I do want to say though is that Manchester United away that's a really hard game these days, and I don't think that point is too bad. So I wouldn't be too panicking if I was an Arsenal supporter about that result at Lee. I think that could prove to be quite a good point come the end of the season. Manchester United hardly concede any goals at all. They're a well-drilled team, and I think they'll be really hard to beat at Lee this season. So that's not a terrible result. Can I also just give a shout out to? I thought Katie Reid played so well. 18 years old.
I was just going to mention Katie. Yeah.
Goodness me, George. Honestly, she looks like she's 26 in the way she's playing. Just kind of the positioning, the anticipation, the calmness, the composure on the ball, the way she's reading situations, just tracking runs. It feels like she's a WSL veteran, and she's 18 years old. I've been really, really impressed. Really impressed with her. So
I think we're very, very blessed to have Leah Williamson, and then you think, oh no, what we're going to do? Leah Williamson's out, and then Katie Reid comes in. I know she faced a little bit of criticism towards the end of last season when I think is it the Villa game and the Brighton game. But like I was saying to people, she was 17 years old playing at right back when that's not where she plays. Yeah. But I think we're seeing what Katie Reid. We're seeing her talent, mate, as well, and I think who else you're going to learn better off of than Leah Williamson, Kimmy Little. These players are probably the best to who you could learn from. You're seeing her in the under 23s as well. I don't want to say, I don't want to be say she's going to do this, do that, but not many people do what she's done and win the Champions League at that age. I don't know. It feels like maybe we've just got another Leah Williamson maybe growing.
Potentially, what you mentioned, Leah, but what's also amazing, she's keeping Lotta and Leia out of the team. How well must she be playing in training? Because Ruben Moy and Kadina, a good centre half, very experienced. So how well must she be playing in training to keep them out of the team? The bits we aren't witnessing behind the scenes must be really, really impressive. And because naturally when Williamson's out, people think, oh well, but they have got really good cover at kind of adult age. But she's keeping them out of the team, and that speaks volumes, I think, with the way that Renee Slegers must admire her talents.
In terms of Katie Reid, you can see the confidence game after game after game. I noticed in the Man United game that she was a lot more commanding and expecting a lot more from her peers in front of her. At the start, when she was first coming in, she was kind of quiet. You can kind of see her just like sharing away and not wanting to take the person in front of her. You need to do better for me to do my job. But in the Man United game, you could see she was shouting. She was at one point, I think she was shouting at Katie McCabe because Katie wasn't tracking back to obviously run into the space that she obviously was in. But
she's got to be a very brave person to shout at Katie McCabe as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that
myself. Katie McCabe myself, but I suppose it's refreshing to see Katie Reid obviously step into that position, a very big position, I think, and show her confidence. And I think going forward, we spoke on it, is when Leah's back, how do we utilise Katie Reid and keep her in the confidence that she's in at the moment, and how do we keep that going forward in terms of Katie Reid being in the squad, or if she's not in the squad, how do we keep her fitness up for her to keep going the way she's going?
Well, good question. My gut feeling, if she keeps playing the way she's playing, is that she'll get chances to start games because there will be so many games coming thick and fast. Champions League, juggling that with the WSL, FA Cup, Continental Cup. Like I don't think that it'll be as simple as Leah coming back in and then Reid not playing anymore. And I think that could really help Arsenal to have the chance to rotate, keep people fresh, minimise injuries. So on the current form, still got a lot of learning to do, still got a lot of improving to do, but on the current form, you can see her playing quite a key role, even later on in the season when everyone's available, for sure. Leah will still be first choice, but I still think you'll see quite a lot of Reid, and that Arsenal will see the value in trying to keep developing her. Minutes will be invaluable for her. So, yeah, I don't think you'll see Leah come back and then Reid disappear to the bench. I don't think that will happen.
Yeah, no, agree. So yeah, I think obviously we're hoping for the win on Saturday. Just once again, thanks for coming on, Tom. It's been really, really good. Hopefully we can do it again as well. So obviously we've been working on an article about audio description around the WSL. Do you want to tell the guys about like how that's come about and how it's gone?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to try and have a look at what the facilities and provisions were like across the WSL for fans with either disabilities or with sensory needs, or fans who are visually impaired in any way, on what their match day experience was really like, because as the women's game grows, I think it's really important that all aspects of the fan base are catered for properly. So it was really interesting because I knew that things weren't quite perfect at all the clubs, but I was surprised at quite how many clubs didn't have some of the provisions that you would think they might have. So yeah, half the clubs in the league don't have a sensory room at their regular WSL stadium. Half do, of course. So we shouldn't forget that. And more than half did not offer audio descriptive commentary, like headsets, which, as you know, George, are so invaluable to any visually impaired supporter trying to enjoy the match day experience. I must say, I spoke to a lot of people, more than a dozen in the end, and the feedback from Arsenal was absolutely glowing. Everybody seemed to agree that they were leading the way with what they were doing for fans of all sorts of disabilities, whether it be the ease of booking things or the what they've tried to help with around the stadium. So that was quite nice to hear. And there are other clubs doing it as well, in a good way. But there are still some stadiums that don't have the provisions. So hopefully that can all change. Hopefully by just highlighting it a little bit, it might help keep it in the conversation, keep it in the thoughts of those running the league, keep it in the thoughts of the clubs. And my view I guess, has always been if you're providing a service for your men's team fans, I would like you to provide it for your women's team fans as well. Interestingly, we didn't write too much about WSL 2 in that article, but I did speak to some people at WSL 2 Club, some of whom sort of said, we would provide these things if we were aware of the demand. But my argument would be that if you almost like chicken and egg, like if you provide these things, you might attract more fans who might otherwise not come because they don't think you're providing the services. Does that make sense? So, while I do have sympathy with the idea that it might be difficult for a club to provide, say, audio descriptive commentary without knowing for certain if anyone was going to take it up, that I understand that's not easy. But I suppose my view would be, if you make it clear that this service is available and that you are willing to provide it, you might, and just communicate that better, then you might attract more fans to your games and just make everybody feel welcome. And that feels like that would probably be more important. What's your experience been like, George? And is there anything you want to say and to add on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think like me and a couple other people worked really hard to get the audio headsets at Boreham Wood through Arsenal as well. So that's been a success in recent times. So I think the more energy and you can put like case studies together, they'll do it. It's just it is difficult. Obviously, having to go to away games. So like obviously, I said to you, Tom, I went to West Ham away in Dagenham, and there was definitely no headset there. Even at Kings Meadow. So I think the smaller grounds is more likely where you're going to struggle with the headsets. So like I've been to some of the bigger ones, like obviously the Tottenham Stadium, the Stamford Bridge and stuff like that, and you get headsets. So yeah, I think things like this, what I've been doing, like the article, what we've done, the Sky Sports project I've done with Flo Lloyd Hughes, that with about the audio headsets, they really helped to get it out there, because I think people without disabilities, it probably just don't enter their mind to think, oh, I don't know, that's how much of a big input that having an audio headset or a sensory room for someone who has autism can be.
Yeah.
So it's good.
You're right. It's about raising awareness, isn't it, and keeping it in the conversation, so that just trying to keep raising standards and improving the match day experience for everybody. Really, that feels like the most important thing. And massive respect to you, George, for the work you've done at Boreham Wood, for example. I hope that you get the credit you deserve for that, because things have come a long way, haven't they, compared to just a few years ago.
I've spoken to George on this as well. Like, I am one of the ones that want to raise awareness on that more. There was a chat before the end of last season of possibly doing the awareness of, like, a couple of us trying to do, like, maybe just a blindfold, just to see the perspective of a blind person's, like, mind at a game, and how, if there isn't an audio set there, then how are they feeling during that game? I know me and George have spoke about possibly doing that going into this season, just to get a better understanding as a fan round about that person, as a good friend of George's. I can see how hard sometimes it is for him at a game, and if that audio description isn't there, then it would just be interesting to see how that person is feeling during that game when that service isn't there. So hopefully going forward there'll be more awareness from that from us as a group as well.
And I think we're going to try and do some more disability awareness, like in the women's game on the channel as well, with a couple other people, because it's not all like I can only say it from a visually impaired point of view, but people that have, say, like other sensory needs. Or
I'm hearing impaired. I wear 2 hearing aids as well. So, like, sometimes at a game it's hard to hear people round about you. I know that there's nothing really that can be done about that, but of course, like so that the sign language up on the screens and things like that, it makes a massive impact on someone like that at a game. I suppose it's going to still got a lot of work to do in terms of what grounds do it and what grounds don't do it, and the research that
I'd
needs
love
to
to
be
see that become league wide. Wouldn't it be nice if it was every club offering the sign language on the big screen?
Yeah. That was one of my questions. Is what do we want to see clubs doing more going forward in terms of what people go through, i.e., blind, hearing, even sensory issues. You want to see clubs do better than what they're doing now, and there should be no excuse to turn around and say, "Oh, we didn't think about that." That should have been top of your list. So it should have.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think I would say what we want to move on from is that with whatever disabilities, it's saying yeah, great, you're aware of it and you acknowledge that, but what are you going to do to make sure these things stay moving forward instead of stagnating and going backwards? Yeah, it's great. We have audio headsets for those who are visually impaired. That's brilliant. You have sensory rooms for those who have autism. But what about having? I don't know. It can't be hard to have the BSL stuff on all the screens at any ground that you're at.
Yeah, and if it comes down to finances, I really hope that is not an excuse, because at the end of the day, all these clubs can afford to provide these services. These are football clubs who more widely, quite happily, pay hundreds of thousands of pounds a week to some players on their salaries. They pay millions and millions of pounds on transfer fees, on agents' fees. There is enough money in this sport, in this industry, to provide these services for those who need it. And so I really hope that that this can change in the future.
Cool. We'll wrap it up there. Just want to say a massive, massive thank you, Tom. It's been a really, really good show.
And really nice to speak to you.
Yeah, it's nice having someone who talks sense on it.
Probably don't do that, do I? Probably waffle a lot, but it's been a good conversation and lots of interesting things to chat about.
No, you're good. So yeah, definitely. Thank you, and hopefully we can get you on again when another time. Obviously, I understand you're really busy and stuff, so we'll work something out. Laura, thank you for being here and helping out with the show.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure, and it's been nice to pick at Tom's brain just to see from a journalist's perspective how it goes, and how he feels when we're all sitting here wondering who's coming to our club or what stories are coming out about who. It's spectacular to be on with you today, Tom, and it's been a pleasure.
No, pleasure to chat to you too. Enjoy the game tomorrow, and good luck.
Yeah.
Cheers. So yeah, obviously, thank you guys for watching. Please hit that subscribe button. Obviously, the show will be put out on X and on YouTube, so appreciate shares and definitely likes, and anyone who wants to get involved, just give us a shout. Everyone's welcome. So yeah, just once again, thank you to Tom, thank you to Laura. Remember, like we said, always try and keep a smile on your face, be happy, talk to people if you're struggling, and come on, you Gunners.
Take it.